Welcome to the Etsy Podcast. I'm your host, Justin McRoberts. I met Jess Ray a number of years ago at a conference where she was helping to lead songs and realized that there was some of her music that I had heard before. Maybe you had that experience where you're paying attention to someone or something, you hear something and you realize like, oh my gosh, this is already in my system. I'm already a fan of this. Well, having already been a fan of her music just by nature of the songs themselves, then watching her engage with people in the art of song leading, I was locked in as a lifetime fan. I really like what Jess Ray does musically. I also really like the way she goes about doing it. When I return to this theme over and over, that art is anything we create that forges a connection between people, I think about people like Jess Ray, who really is actually about that connection, who pays attention to the connection, who senses that connection in herself. You'll hear that in the conversation, and I think you'll feel that in the work she does if you're not already familiar with it. So check out this conversation. I think you'll dig it. The recording is in progress. That's what the machine just told us.
I can't remember. Did I promise to do anything fancy with the audio?
No, I don't think so. What would that even mean?
Did you like me in a previous email to be like, I'll set up my whole rig and like whatever, but I'm just hanging on by the seat of my pants today, so.
That's great.
Is it cool? Just Zoom? It's just Zoom audio? That's fine.
Yes. I have magical elvish friends who will take whatever I do here and make it seem like I know what the hell I'm doing too.
I love that. That's amazing.
Where are you right now? Geographically.
Louisville.
Okay.
I'm on a tour. I'm on tour with Andrew Peterson, and the rest of my life looks like me booking everything, driving myself there, setting it all up myself, selling my own merch, all of that. This is like I ride on a bus and show up somewhere else. Someone sets up my guitar and I play 3 songs at some point in the night, and that's it. So
yeah,
it's weird. So it's a little disorienting because I don't know necessarily where I am every day.
Because you're on someone else's
time.
I'm going to make one quick adjustment and see if this makes a little bit of a difference. And if I lose you, I'll call you back. All right, that might be a slightly better connection. There we go. Are we back in the flow here?
It seems the same to me. If it's better, that'd be great too.
Yeah, well, we're off and running anyways.
Okay.
You started touring in like 2014, 2013, like on the road touring, like
I'm more like 2015, 2016.
Because you cut a record and then you did the thing you do when you do what you do with rock and roll is you cut a record and then you take it places where you don't live and play it for people.
Exactly.
You posted a thing recently. I want to talk about home here for a minute. You posted a thing recently about you'd been out on a solo tour supporting the most recent release of yours. Mm-hmm. So not someone else's tour, your tour, out on the road doing a thing. And then you got back and you posted something I thought was really interesting and reflective because you were talking about being home. And I don't remember if you called yourself a homebody, but so I won't make any assumptions. I think I'll just ask the questions. My perception of you is that you are maybe not like full-blown introvert, but that like you're someone who needs your time away. Can you talk a little bit about not just like the road is hard, we can talk about that in a minute, but talk about home for you and how has your experience of home as the concept, the reality of home, how has that changed since 2015, almost 8 years ago? You're on the road, if I'm getting this right, you're on the road somewhere between like 50 to about 85 days out of every year. How has your experience of home changed as someone who values, like, I've got my space, I can close my doors and no one can come in? Talk about that for you.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. Well, no, that's a super insightful question. Like, I would say I'm a homebody. I would say I kind of feel at all times at a deficit of just time at home.
Really?
I get about 2 weeks at home on average in a stretch before it's interrupted, and kind of 4 weeks is like amazing, like to have 4 weeks straight at home. So I would say the interesting part right now is I just am struggling a lot through that, and feeling like I want to be home, and like I get in a rhythm at home.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, that's upended by 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out. I left the day after Thanksgiving for 3.5 weeks, and because we don't live in Nashville, so the tour that we're on comes home to Nashville, and there's not enough time for us to get to our home.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's actually interesting because I feel like I want a lot more time at home these days, and I can't really get it because of just the season I'm in. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to block out those times. So I'll be home kind of Christmas through the month of January.
Yeah.
And I've been really like, everyone stay away. Like I'm like really having to fight to keep that time open and free of travel. So I think just because, I'm in this interesting season of trying to learn if I'm going to live this life that's kind of like on for whole weeks at a time.
Yep.
What does time off look like if kind of the normal rhythm would be 5 days of work for 2 days of rest, or 4 days for 3 days of rest? Like if I'm just on for whole months at a time, where are those stretches of whole weeks that I'm unapologetically like unavailable? This is my rest time. And I think that's a rhythm that I've really struggled with, and then I would say have been paying the consequences of the past few years. Here, even to put it in more context, it's like COVID helped me to realize I was running at a very unhealthy pace.
Okay.
It slowed down the demand where I was able to learn some new habits.
Yeah.
Or at least be introduced to those new habits.
Yeah.
And get the false sense that I had grown. And then the beginning of, like COVID sort of seems over. So, which it's not, but like everyone is like, let's make up for 2 lost years of time.
Oh yeah.
So let's plan one in events and overdo it completely. And then my capacity to run at that level came down. My thought that I could, I don't know, have better, healthier rhythms. I had, kind of that impression.
Yeah.
And then all this demand of events and stuff like that comes in, and all of a sudden I'm running at a higher pace with like way less energy to do so. And anyway, so the past, like I would say 2021 into 22 has been not great of trying to catch back up to running at that level. And really honestly being hit with like pretty massive anxiety, and just kind of like my body going like, what are you doing?
That's great.
So that now I'm in this season. Sorry, I'm going on.
No, this is the conversation. This is where I want to go.
That like I'm in this interesting moment of going, really it was like this summer having just bad, like almost panic attack level anxiety and issues, to where I would say June to now I've been working on really acknowledging, hey, you might have started to learn some lessons, but like implementing those into a way that's like really protects my life moving forward.
Yep.
You learned it here, but like when the requests come in, do you have the ability to say no?
Yes.
To draw the boundary, to like make the change that you need to, or are you going to continue to just feel like you have to run after everything, say yes to everything, please everybody, and set no boundary? So I'm in this moment of going, hey, it's once the requests come in, that's when you are tested on, did you learn anything?
Yeah.
And then in this lesson,
when you actually have choices to make, because it's one thing in your mind to say like, I need to establish a rhythm of work and rest. I need to establish that, and we can get that in conversation. Be like, yep, I need, and even the math you just played out, we're like 4 to 3, it's 5 to 2,
right?
And then the actual reality of it is, like, in conversation, someone hits you with like, hey, in June, are you available these days? And you're like, yes. And then 2 days later, someone's like, are you available these days in June? And you're like, yes. And then when you look at it on the calendar, you're like, oh shit, all of these days are all like, they're the same. I just booked 3 weeks of shows in a row. And
Yep.
I didn't have the self-awareness because I'm not thinking about my rhythm. I'm just thinking about booking shows. I didn't have the
Yep.
self-awareness to know that I just said yes to a whole lot more than I want to. And I don't even know if I would have had the will to say no given the opportunity. It's like,
Right.
it really is. A lot of the theme of this season of the podcast is about the what I call the rhythm and tension between rest and work. That because I don't buy the work-life balance thing. I don't believe in balance at all. That it is about a tension and a rhythm like jogging. That, like, my left stride and my right stride, the one doesn't propel me forward, the other one doesn't propel me forward. It literally is like the rhythm and the tension between the one and the other that propels me forward. So I need my rest. I also want to work because you are in the same way that you're a homebody. You like the road. You like connecting with people. You like being, because in the same post you
Yep.
said something along the lines of like there's nothing quite like that experience of being
Right.
in the room with people and connecting in and through your art.
Yep.
So this rhythm and tension that we learn is, I guess, is a self-learning process. Not just by the numbers, but even in our own souls, like, oh, this is how I'm shaped. One of those
Sure.
questions then ends up being like, it's easier, I think, for some of us to know this is what it looks like to work. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks. This is where my joy comes from in work. For some of us, it's easy to do that. But the question of, like, what does it look like for me to rest is a weirder question. It's a more fluid, kind of nebulous question.
Yep.
What are some things you've maybe learned in the last, like, from COVID season
Yeah.
through now, about when you have those days off? Not even just, and we'll talk about this later on, like, not even like how to protect those days, but when you have those days off,
Yeah.
what does actual rest look like for you? Like, what makes you feel rested, recovered? Like, how does that play out for you?
Yeah. I think some of it, yeah, there's some things I've learned over the past few years that are what make those days so refreshing and helpful.
Yeah.
And I would say the first thing, kind of before getting into the day, is to prepare for the day.
Hmm.
So for me, I don't feel rested if my space is crazy. Like if it's dirty, if there's stuff everywhere. So then I work extra hard the night before to make sure the dishes are done, to make sure that, the house is generally put together, because
Yeah.
then that just starts by, or making sure I have what I need to cook the meals that I want to make the next day.
Yeah.
Making sure it's all gathered to be able to rest. And then the day of, for me, it's like just absolutely no social media. I just in general try to, like, turn off all notifications on my phone. Definitely don't open my email. My goodness, never do that. And then just social media and news, all of that would be just don't even engage with that the whole day.
Hmm.
I would say it's been helpful to read a couple of books that have helped me understand, whether it's like Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, but then like some of the sources that he's kind of pulling from. I started to chase those down.
Yeah.
John Mark Comer's book,
Yep.
just on, like, the history of Sabbath and what it was for the Jewish people group, like the, I don't know, it's almost like a Thanksgiving every single week, like
Yeah.
a sense of celebration. So for me and my husband, it's like, we normally take the dogs on a hike, do something outdoors.
Yep.
One thing that we've just chosen to do is we don't take highways anywhere on Sundays, or not on whatever for us, it's normally a Sunday, but
Yeah.
it's whatever our Sabbath day is that we set apart. We just choose not to take highways, just have a sense of,
Fascinating.
let's allow this to take longer and to take back roads, and just kind of
I like that.
choose to, like, slow the day down and
Yeah.
like feel a little bit of, feel that tension of, like, oh, but it's just going to take longer to get there. And it's like,
That's a
we have the
really,
time.
I love this. That's a very specific and intentional choice you make with
Yeah.
with an actual consciousness of what it does. Like to not take highways, freeways because it's going to take you longer to get somewhere. That's really great. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard people talk about like the two things you should do are rest and worship. So, I mean, I would say that that's essentially what we're doing. It's
Yeah.
either some sort of napping, sleeping in, like just keeping it low key at the house.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, if we can, we try to, sometimes we get to church. Sometimes that doesn't feel like the thing that's going to be restful for us that day.
Yeah.
I don't ever lead worship on a actual Sabbath that I'm taking.
Yeah.
To me, that goes against the grain of that. I mean, I don't know. For me, it is just because it's so tangled into my job and all of that.
Yes. Which
So
that's a
yeah,
thing unto itself that I want to poke at two things. One, I want to talk about your experience with social media. But this question comes up a lot when specifically for I haven't come up with a great phrase for this, but like for professional Christians, for folks who end up in leadership positions a lot, for those of us who facilitate spaces in which people worship or connect or even rest. The experience of some of those practices is very different. So when I'll coach pastors or I'll coach artists in different facets who will all have different experiences of church, pastors particularly, and the capacity for a Christian or a religious leader person to rest or connect in a curated space like a church service, we'll have these conversations about Sabbath rest, and there's like a bit of a conflict. Like, if I have a day of rest, do I even go to some sort of a gathering? Because it's not necessarily even triggering. It's that like I don't feel, this is not everyone, but I don't necessarily feel connected, rested. It's so tangled up into, for better or for worse, it's so tangled up into my job, into what I do culturally, that when I'm in that space, I don't feel like it's for me. I don't feel like that's a lot of a lot of the conversation I have with folks about the rhythm of rest and specifically Sundays. You lead songs in a lot of these places. You get invited in to do talk about that tension for you about like church attendance as a practice of rest and worship and connection. That's had to have changed a bit over the last 6 or 7 years.
yeah,
Talk about that.
yeah, for sure. It's changed a lot for us. So I met my husband at a mega church in Raleigh, and we were both leading there. And I would say there was so much good that came out of that season, including meeting my husband.
Yeah.
Probably that would be the top thing. I learned how to run a team of, band of 10 people with 6 singers, 2,000 people in the audience, and not be afraid to like lead that moment. So it was like boot camp in a lot of ways for what doors were opening in my life at that point. So there's a lot that I'm grateful for that I learned in that season. A lot of hard stuff as well, like really, really sad, difficult transitions and just, a lot. We experienced a lot of what seems to be true, unfortunately, about a lot of mega churches, like the kind of the history and some of the trends that happen inside of those kinds of environments.
Specifically with regards to like power dynamics and
exactly, just like integrity of people, like people getting platforms that just like, and then the pace that it's going at. So it's kind of making celebrities out of the leaders, demanding a lot of them, not having a culture of rest. They tank their lives, they tank the ministries. We're all living in the cleanup of that. And
you found yourself in the same soup that a lot of us found ourselves in, when this thing that has a lot of good to it suddenly had almost all of its negatives come to the surface. We all got sick at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just, for whatever reason, be it spiritual or whatever, it's just like it was time to expose all of that.
A little bit of all of it, I think. Yeah.
And I think it's wild that it happened everywhere all at the same time. And
how does that, so for someone who this will be way too thorough a way to ask this question than I intended. For someone who is often really useful in those spaces, how do you engage now?
Yeah.
Like what does your participation look like? Like I'm assuming you're more cautious. You're definitely developing a more of like kind of a wise perspective with regards to the artifact that church as a gathering is. Like, what does your engagement look like? How do you feel connected? Talk about that.
Yeah, and I'll answer that and kind of the previous question like together,
Go.
because we've made a pretty, with all respect, really, I want to say that out loud, to the many wonderful good people that were part of that church and all the good that came out of it.
Yeah.
We've made a massive pivot. Kind of COVID, because it was a lot of church, it was numerous campuses, full bands, down to one online service. We were like, honestly, we're like 4 times overbooked for this one service that needs to get done every week. This is a perfect moment for us to kind of transition on. So I took a sabbatical. I had been leading worship every single Sunday with almost no exceptions for probably somewhere between 10 and 12 years, every Sunday, and or traveling. So it was always some weekend event or leading worship. So I had not realized how the kind of demand and just really unhealthy patterns that it had. And really, I was feeling like God was giving me the opportunity to go like, you've watched what living like this does to people's families and ministries. Yeah. You have a chance right now to choose a different way. Like this is your chance to realize you can't run at that level. It's unhealthy. Do you want to make a different, like a change in your life?
You felt that as an act, like that was an invitation for you.
Yeah,
but at the same time, the way I like you're presenting this, it was also a choice. You weren't like forced out. You had a choice totally. In the moment. You're noticing this. What are you planning to, or what are you wanting to do about it?
Yeah. So yeah, I took it was probably a year and a half before I ever led worship in a church service again. So that would have gotten us to like 2021, maybe August. So we've pivoted back to just the church I grew up in. It is sometimes painfully uncool. Like it is dorky. And there's a lot of older women who are going to pray for you. And like, I don't know, just people who faithfully followed God for a long time, and no fancy lighting or sound or fog or, like it's just kind of normal, and it has potlucks and just kind of unfancy, genuine people. And so I'm not on staff. I rarely volunteer for the worship team. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So it's made it's one service. So we used to go to where we were was 4 services, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. The whole thing, it was just so intense. So now just literally by that pivot, like it really is like when we were talking about, it's much easier to show up there on a Sunday. One, because it's not highly produced. So that part of my brain that's going like, this could be better, or I would do it this way or whatever, because the entire thing, if I was going to do it, would be completely, it's just like this guy just like singing 25-year-old worship songs. And I'm just like, I get to take that for what it is versus like look at it like, how do we like strategize and make this like better and cooler and more up to date and inclusive and all the different things that like I might like come into a service with like kind of a
work brain. You're in there with work brain and like the way we've been trained to make it better in a very, very specific way, that there's like a model of how this is supposed to be. How do I measure this against this $1.6 million budget production? Everything is measured against that. And you've been able to turn that off.
Exactly. So like just by going to this other church, I'm not really coming to it with my work brain. So thankfully that is much more calm on any given Sunday morning that I'm there. And then just simply it's one service, and you just kind of see everybody who goes to the church is there at the same time. And we just, so it's just the burden is light versus like, I don't know, it being tangled in some weird stuff. So anyway, so sometimes we go there on a Sunday morning that we're taking a Sabbath. We would actually go to church on Sunday, just to enjoy worship, see people, and then head on to get tacos and margaritas.
That's awesome. There was a willingness to learn and relearn, not just among congregates, but among church leaders around, for the most part, for everyone. There was a posture of like looking at the thing we were doing and asking questions about, is like, not just is this working, but like even the question behind that, like, what do I mean by working? Like, what am I trying to achieve with this? What's the purpose of it? Yeah. I hope that we can remain in that posture, that like we don't try to land at it like a next thing. Like, okay, well, we're done with that and here we are and now we're settled again. Right. But continue to approach our religious gatherings specifically with that same posture of self-awareness and self-learning, and like, if it's not working, to bless and enrich and to deepen. If it's not doing that, and if people aren't healthier, then change it. Like, we've been so unwilling for so long to change it because we're so tied into like, this is the way it's supposed to be, regardless of the cost. Yeah. But to that awareness and that posture of being here and paying attention to how is this actually affecting my heart? How do I feel? I hope we stay in that posture for a long time and don't like settle on another like monolithic way to do the damn thing. For real. But just get together. And there's something about being with people who are in their 70s and 80s who don't care about the lights or how long the sermon was, or they just want to be with the people they're with, and everything else is icing. There's something really magical about that really only comes from gathering with people who've lived long enough to let go of all the garbage.
Yep. 1,000%. I know. Go for it.
No. So, your practice of rest, talk about work for a little bit. This is your, 4th full-length project. Yeah. Personally. Yep. Plus you're touring. You also have other artistic endeavors. Talk about like your work process. Do you have hours you work in the day? Is it a matter of like you have a routine? You start in the morning. We don't work before 10. Do you songwrite at night? What's it look like for you to make work in your life? Do you have a routine? Do you work from inspiration? How does work happen for Jess Ray?
Yeah. I would say over the years, I've like fought to get more and more organized in that. I would say, still learning how to do that. But I think I'm a driven and fairly organized person now. There was previous seasons where I was such a hot mess that like I drove everyone crazy. And then I started to be sick of people telling me they couldn't count on me. And so I feel like
you were driving people crazy. How? Like in what way?
Like not answering texts, never being, like not showing up on time, just kind of like more traditionally artisty, like where it's kind of like all in my feelings and just like flying one thing to the next. And anyway, I think for 10 years, I've been working to kind of like mature that other side of me to be like organized, driven, have a plan, have a strategy, so I would say I do pretty well now to like, as an artist who is self-employed, I get up, I get to work. I have somewhat of a daily rhythm. For me, I always have a better day if I can start in some sort of quiet time. Sometimes it feels like scripture would be, I just try to like not overthink it and just like, if reading the Bible feels like not what I can do today, then I'll just journal for a second or pray. Yeah. Or I have this little app on my phone that's just like 13-minute, little prayer and scripture thing. And sometimes the most I can do is just hit play and listen to that thing. But yeah, start in quiet. Try not to look at any social media or email before that time. My brain, it just does so much better if I get up, make my coffee, let the dogs out, or like really, when I'm on the road, if I can have this piece of my day be the same no matter where I am, if I can get up, make coffee, and have some sort of quiet time with God before I jump into the next thing, then my day, no matter where I am, is consistent.
Yeah, there's a kind of a
And
grounding.
there's something
In spiritual direction
bring me
circles we'll call it centering. There's a way in
exactly.
which a little bit goes back to the question of home and how you experience home. There's a sense of place
Yes.
that like a quiet time or some sort of routine or practice kind of grounds you in. So you get
Yeah,
up, there's a coffee element, bless your
exactly.
heart. And then there's a quiet time element, which is fantastic. And then do you have like limits or what's the word I'm looking at? Like limits, boundaries? Like, do you work until you can't work anymore, or do you have like it's 4:30 and I'm done because margaritas are at 5? Like, how do you structure that you're actually like once you're in work? How are you framing your
Yeah.
work life?
Yeah. I mean, and the asterisk to all of this is like, I'm just trying to figure it out. So it's like, I
Amen.
don't know if it's like always perfect at all. But yeah, I think for me and like my home life, I think because we don't have kids, because my Kyle, he is my Kyle, my
There you
husband
go. That's
Kyle
fine. We can.
is
You're Kyle.
is also creative, but he has a day job and then does a ton of like other stuff on the side. Sometimes we'll work till 6, have a dinner break 6 to 8 together, and sometimes we'll do like a nighttime kind of work sesh, like 8 to 10
Hmm.
or something like that, because both of us work really well at night. But in general, I would say the area that I need to grow in is like once I get to work, it can consume the entire rest of my day.
Hmm.
Versus like having a really good like cutoff point where it's like we're putting this down at the end of the day. I
Yeah.
think, and some of it's just season of life, and we've got all these opportunities, and like I said, like that's kind of the time of Kyle's day where he could maybe mix someone else's project or
Yeah.
do this podcast with somebody or something like that. But
There is
yeah,
something
so
to be
I
said for those seasons in life when you can put in like 12 to 14 hours regularly and feel okay.
yeah
There's something to be said for like do that when you can, because at
yeah
some point you won't be able to, and you're going to freaking
right.
wish you'd put in the extra 10 hours that week and the extra 20 that. There's something to be said for like the general season in life in which you can put in 80 to 90 hours for weeks at a
Right.
time to knock that thing out. And there's a joy and that's what I mean. Like there's a rhythm and tension in there. That's that season. And then there's going to
And
be another season in
exactly.
which you don't get to.
Yeah. And we do feel like we're in this interesting moment where we're doing so much stuff that we love, like
Yeah.
just are so passionate about. And kind of at a tipping point, I think I'm trying to work on my heart, like not trying to always aim for some goal, like that's going to be the break in my music career, or it's going
Mm.
to just like be the thing that but in general, I do feel like we're at this interesting moment in my career, in our ministry life and all of that, where what we've worked at for 7 years now has helped us to move from less and less of the things we don't want to do to
Mm.
more and more of the things we are so passionate about, the opportunities we're hoping we were going to get. I feel like the way we're explaining things, creating things, it's all just getting so much better and
Yeah.
more direct. And so
Yeah.
it does feel like a notable season. And then once again, we don't have kids. So it's just like, as long as that's true, we're just going to run at like, sorry to bring up John Mark Comer. I love him,
It's a
but
good
it's
book.
just like, sounds like I love him more than I do. But he has this thing called, I think he says dink days, which is double income, no kids. So we're just like, we're just going to use the
That's
dink
really funny.
days until they're over
Yeah.
to try to keep building the things that we feel like we have in our hands and the doors that are opening. And so I would say there is tendency for our work life to kind of span. And then Kyle and I love working together. And so it's like,
Yeah.
it does kind of envelop our lives
Yeah.
sometimes. So I am trying to work on when do I draw those boundaries, and really more than anything, just set it aside
Yeah.
for the core heart of Sabbath, which says my life does not depend on me striving
Yeah.
to do this. Like
It
this
means you
is me
can work
going
in,
like
it means you can work in
I can
joy.
put my hand,
Yeah.
yep. I can put my hands up and surrender this and even if that's hard for me, remember that anything I have is from God. Anything that comes in my life and grows out of what I'm doing has to be a result of God and not my work. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing more than anything, is we have to keep a rhythm of Sabbath to remember to get over ourselves, honestly.
Yes.
Just to like be able to take our hands off the thing for a while.
I want to talk about social things here for a second. On three levels. I want you to reflect a little bit on your experience of social media. It's come up a couple times so far in this conversation, predominantly framed in this is most conversations, predominantly framed in like a semi-negative, like it's a thing to, well, we'll come back. I want to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about friendships, and then we're going to talk about making music with other people. And all these things are a little bit tangled together, as is most of life. But talk about your experience of social media. Are you someone who would you do much in the way of social media if you weren't a professional musician? Do you like being online? Do you have authentic friends? Like, talk about you as a person who has friendships, values friendship, but also needs your space. Talk about social media. You like it? It's necessary. You're learning to like it. Where are you?
Yeah, I think if I'm honest, in January of this year, I took it all off my phone and took one whole month off. And other than just like maybe the first few days when I had to get used to that, by the end, I was just good. I could have just kept riding on with no social media. So I think if I didn't have it for my career, I probably wouldn't have it on my phone most of the time.
Wow.
At all.
What were the negatives that went? What were the negatives that went away, or the positives that showed up? So at the tail end of the month, you said, "I'm good." Like, what was what was absent from your life that was present and problematic, and then what showed up that was more of a gift after a month away from social media engagement?
Yeah, I think I would say, and sorry to bring the Enneagram, it's so white girl Christian of me to bring that in.
That's totally fine.
I am a 4. I'm a more of a feeler person, so it's just like I absorb a lot of false responsibility. I carry a lot of what I see along with me for hours or days after. So I would say I like when I don't know what's going on in other people's lives unless I saw them somewhere or texted. So like if someone's having a bad day, like that matters, but maybe it wasn't mine to know that was going on. Or like if they had a tragedy happen in their life, kid dies or something like that, that will just destroy me. And then I'll think, what if that's going to happen to my kids? What if that's going to happen to my nieces and nephews or something like, and it's like that story wasn't necessarily mine to carry, but I exposed myself to it online. That tragedy. And I just think a lot of times we are literally not strong enough to hold all of the like knowledge of good and evil that we are just taking in just fractions of seconds. Like what it's doing to our brains is not good. So I think I just can acknowledge that I am absorbing things all day long like a sponge. And my brain was clearer to not know
everything.
Of course,
everything all the time.
Hard tragedy is going to happen. But like, what if we reduced our, think about 100 years ago, like the things that we would have known, it would be like the lives of our friends and family. Maybe if we get some sort of news, general happenings around our town. But as far as like like awful tragedies all over the world, knowing those all at once, it's just like we're not meant to know all of that. So I think it was a clarity of mind, just less false responsibility. And then, I think I just struggle like any artist who feels that they need to use it as a tool, which I do. And that's the way that I can connect. Like we're saying, like touring is not my favorite thing in the world, but it allows me to be in this space where then I get to hear and collect stories along the way of where my songs are changing people's lives. And so it helps me go back and remember what it is that I'm doing. And in a similar way, like social media helps me to hear where my music is making a difference in other people's lives and intersecting with their story. And so I would be sad to lose that connection with my fans and my followers. And so it feels like an imperative to continue to engage with the tool. It's maddening to like keep learning how to do it because it shifts, and there's a lot about the companies that just, they suck. Like the companies that run all this stuff, like it's really terrible if I have to pay them to reach the people who've chosen to follow me. Like that is really sad and sucky. But yeah, so I would say I get exhausted just jumping through the hoops of learning how to use it. But just trying to continue to, at all crossroads, like come to it in a meaningful and genuine way, share my heart, and just, if it's something that people need, great, you know, and try not to allow it to hold as much weight over me.
So then, friendships in general for you, what are you still living in? You don't live in Nashville? You're still living in North Carolina?
Yeah.
That's it's an intentional choice for you to not move to Nashville. You and Kyle both make music. Nashville is, I'm asking this as someone who also doesn't live in Nashville, never has. But you have lots of Nashville friends, and we'll get around to that when we talk about music and friendship. But you live in North Carolina. That's an intentional decision, and an ongoing intentional decision. Mm-hmm. Talk about your social life just for a minute in terms of like having friends. One of the tricks here's part of where I'm coming from is one of the tricks to being a musician, being an artist, being a professional artist is when you're surrounded by people who are also artists. There's less explaining to do. There's a little bit of like there's no code, like, cause we're all like, yes, I know what that feels like. And yes, I know what that, you know, but being around folks who like have 8 to 4s and 9 to 5s, there can be a little bit of a gap, in terms of life experience and, you know, work understanding. You've chosen to stay in a town where like there aren't a crap ton of singer-songwriter, traveling musician folks. That's an intentional choice. Talk about the role of friendship. How do you identify people you like? How do you identify and value friendships in your life? Why have you stayed where you are? Talk about your social life for a minute.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was born and raised there. Kyle was born and raised there. Pretty much all of our family still lives there within about an hour radius. We have an incredible friends community that has been around since about 2015 when we started meeting, doing like just a night where someone would make a meal and we would have a time of worship. We called it Feast and Feast. And we've actually done that for 7 years now. And all of my best friends and all the people who were in my wedding and everybody that I'm closest with at this point in my life is actually not related to any particular church. We probably all go to 8 different churches. So there's really something interesting, special that has happened in our community there that I would take it very seriously to ever leave it. That being said, I've been spoiled rotten to basically have doors held open for me in Nashville. So we've got a place or two that we stay that is essentially an apartment whenever we're in town. I'm there basically once a month for about a work week, or like in this case, it's like all of December, because we're on this tour. And so I have this weird other life in Nashville where I sometimes don't even use my GPS to drive around. I just, 5 years of basically being there once a month means I almost feel like I live there. Lots of people think I do live there. But that's not where our dogs live. You know, that's technically not home. As home as it feels.
That's how you know where home is where your dogs are. That's actually home.
Exactly.
I like this place, but my dogs aren't there. So that's not home.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And so
that's good.
So there's like we've got that community there, and I just feel just ridiculously blessed because it would make it as easy as any move ever could be for us to move to Nashville, and we would gain some career convenience. We would gain some understanding, like what you're saying. Like I was, in East Nashville recording my record at the beginning of the year, and every time we went to lunch, there was somebody else within earshot that was like, oh man, I just think we have to change the mixes on this song. Like, what are, like talking shop about music. Yeah. And I'm like, if that happened in Raleigh, I would literally get out of my seat and be like, who are you? Like, like talk about what you do, because it's so rare. It was just so cool to like and it's almost just weird. Like, it's like everybody is doing.
Is there an upside to that though? Is there an upside to being in a place where it's not shop talk? Is it, which this is the transition question, is the friendships you have, I mean, you've done a number of like group projects. You're also in a band with other people. Is there a value to having friendships as an artist? Talk about the value of having friendships outside of your like work life, where there are people who don't understand. Is there a value to that, or is like, is one preferential? Talk about that dynamic a little bit.
Yep. Oh, that's so true. Yeah, I mean, I think it's super good, like you're saying, to have some friends that understand the really strange lifestyle that we live. That's like, you can I'm going to be out of the picture basically for 3 to 4 months, just unavailable almost.
Yeah.
And then when I'm back in, I'm all in. And I choose my own hours. So it's like, my sister-in-laws know that when I'm back in town, it's like they could call me on a bad day and I would come take the kids in like no time. But like, it's just this weird, and my income, I make like a quarter of my income in like a month or two. Yeah. And so like learning, like, it's like, how do you learn like the really intense schedule, the really intense influx of money, and then just nothing at all? And so like the balance of that is just like nice to have friends who understand. And I just feel grateful that I've been given friends who understand my work life / ministry life, and how bizarre or different it is. And I do wish sometimes that there was more of those in Raleigh, but I do feel like God's meeting that need through a lot of our community in Nashville. And so it kind of makes it sweet going home to Raleigh, where like people don't care about that. And I don't know, like I remember trying to like make sure I got on a flight home to just get to a night where like all of our friends were making homemade pizza, because one of our friends makes the most ridiculous pizza you've ever had in your life. And I'm like, and one of my Nashville friends was like, you need to get home for that. And I was like, you're right. Like, it's that stuff, like that community stuff, that's just like, it's irreplaceable, and it's so balancing in my life. And my best friend like works on a ranch, and like works with horses all the time. She's not musical at all. And so it's fun. It's good, I think, in balancing, to have people outside of that world who just honestly don't give a crap who, who I'm name dropping, or who like, it's just,
they don't know who that cat is anyways. They're like, I don't know who Steven is. That's awesome. Good. Is he a cool guy?
Right. Right. Exactly.
This many years in, you're having a good time. You're on a bit of an upswing. Like I was in Pennsylvania a few weeks ago, and a song of yours came on at this conference. I was conference at this retreat thing I was at, and a bunch of folks. It was from the new project, and a bunch of folks like started singing along. How do you, at this point in your career, and this would be like a multi-level question, how are you measuring success right now? Like, how do you know you're winning? How are you personally measuring success? I think, and this is just so you understand where the question is coming from, I think success is a moving target. I think we get to decide these things. It's really easy to be tempted by like, well, again, the same conversation we had earlier about church, where like, this is what church should look like, is you got to have this, 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 and this. And then we try to scale down from the folks who have the big, but success for an artist really is like, it's a moving target, and you get to decide where it is. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're defining success now. And then 15 years down the line from now, do you want to still be doing this? And what will it have, like, how will you have measured the value of a 20-year career? Like, what will have made it worth it to do it 15 years from now? So right now, how are you measuring success? And then what do you hope happens if all your plans are executed and you just nail it? Like, what will your life look like 15 years from now? What's going on in the world around you 15 years from now that'll make you feel like it was worth it to put this time and energy into being an artist?
Yeah, that's such a good question. You're great at this.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would say like the fastest way to get to the first answer of how I'm measuring success is that to first admit that like even as recent as now, I'm struggling with that, and continuing to hold numbers, playlisting, attention, sense of buzz around, it just music feels very consumable. So, I just put out this record. I've never been more proud of a record. I don't think I've ever made a record more interesting sounding and says what I wanted to say. And it just, people are into it, for a minute, and they actually behind the scenes, they're into it and they're listening. Mm-hmm. But it's like, there's some buzz and you get that kind of like, okay, people are with me. And then no one's talking about it, 3 or 4 weeks later. And you feel that like kind of just disappointment or just literally my Spotify numbers. I released a new record and my Spotify numbers went down. I'm like, how the heck does that happen? Just like the system, that all the algorithm and all of that is maddening. It's like to chase all of that is just, it's such a waste of my time and heart. And so anyway, to get to the real answer, is stuff like what I got yesterday in my inbox, which was a woman telling me that she was with her best friend who was dying of cancer. And one of the last things they did that day was listen to my record. And I have like piles, sorry,
you're fine,
of those emails, like the number of testimonies or like people telling me how many times that's where my music is going. Yeah. And that like I'm the music people reach for when their lives are coming apart. So like I am regularly called back to that being the metric for success. Yeah. Is like if I can just keep writing songs that like make people want to stay alive. Yeah. Help people endure their worst days. Can I have a more privileged, like what an honor. And so I think I'm hoping that I'm turning a corner. I'd like to see myself turn a corner where like I throw some big middle fingers to the rest of like the system and just stay like on the heart of things. Yeah. And just keep doing what I'm doing. Because when you look at like the numbers over long term, like everything about my Instagram, my Spotify, whatever, it's going like this. It's so slow, but it's up and to the right. More people are listening, more people are buying in. And I've just too long like chased like the thing that might break, because everything about the entertainment industry pushes you that way. Like we need to get this song to break. We need to get this, this big thing to like hit. And I've just chased that and just been disappointed so many times over so many years that if there's anything I'm hopeful about, it's that in the next season, kind of even soon, like kind of that I'm maturing into this place of really on a daily basis able to keep the right goals in front and not be as distracted by the stuff that doesn't matter. And and like the thing that I've been given, which is so sweet, is just a fan base or followers that are so bought in, like over long term. So I would like to continue to write music that they would come and eat from, tables that I would set that they would come and eat from for the rest of my life. I think people have done that well. If you look at my biggest inspiration for this is Sarah Groves, who's, she's a smaller singer-songwriter, still reaching hundreds of thousands of people, but we're not talking millions of people. We're not talking Good Father and, the biggest worship songs that reach millions or potentially billions of people. We're still talking a smaller amount of people. Yeah. But if I could just kind of bless and minister to a small subset of the world who's found my music, I'd love to do that in a similar way to Sarah Groves, like be on, album 11, 12, 13, and, you know, still people are just coming to eat at whatever I'm serving.
Yeah. There's such a, I mean, there's a, and we'll wrap it up here, but like, I mean, there's a way in which we, like, sadly, and I would say mistakenly, like, sentimentalize those moments, like over sentimentalize those moments in a way that, like, strips them of their value when you get the email or someone stops you after a show, or like says something after, and like they can't finish because they've been so affected. We sentimentalize those moments as if like they're cute, like puppy dog cute. When like that lasts, like that's actually like food for the soul. So one, like how important it is for listeners, people that the machinery we would call consumers, to like pause in that moment and be like, I'm moved by this, and like send the email. Like send the email to that artist you don't think who knows who you are, whatever. Like send the email, send the message, and let them know, because that artist is on the other side wondering, like you just talked, like you don't always know how to measure success, and you're so poorly trained by the mechanisms of culture around you to do that wisely and healthily. It can be life altering to get that text or that email. You're good. You're choking to death, but you're fine. So the record we're talking about, or have been talking about, mostly is a record called Born Again. It's a super fun record. And it was a cool departure sonically from what you've been doing in the past. And just as a closing encouragement, I hope that you continue to take joy in what you're doing, like in the people you're around, but also in your process. Cause I think your songs are fantastic. And I really like, we met very briefly at a thing called The Breath in the Clay, like back pre-COVID. So like 1976 or so.
Right.
And, just really appreciated the value that you put on connections with the people in the room. It made me a fan, because I'd heard your music specifically with Taylor before, as Mission House. I'd heard the music before and liked the music, but the emphasis you put on connection with people in the room, not just interpersonally, but even from stage. And I think you picked this up. It's a rare thing to find folks who are aware enough of their process and their connection to like be that present to the people that they're giving themselves to. And you do a really good job of that. And so I hope you're still around 15 years from now and more deeply invested and happier, and maybe have new dogs or whatever, and have a deeper sense of home. But keep it up. I think you're doing a tremendous job, and I'm a huge fan.
Justin, thank you so much. You're amazing at what you do. And I'm getting over a cold.
It's fine.
Yeah, so I've got this weird thing where it's like I'm fine until all of a sudden I'm uncontrollably coughing, and praying to God it doesn't happen on stage. But anyway, let me try to finish what I was saying.
Yeah, go.
You're amazing at what you do. Thank you for asking such intentional questions. Thank you for what you're adding to the world, and appreciate talking to you today.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of the At Sea Podcast. If you want to follow up with Jess Ray, you can search her name, Jessray, at Spotify, Apple Music. Go to the Google. If you want to go directly to her website, it is jessraymusic.com, Jessray music.com. From there, you can bounce to the newest work, which is called Born Again, as well as any of the older stuff she's been doing, which, again, I'm already a huge fan of. If, on top of that, you'd like to be one of the folks who makes this podcast happen week after week, you can visit me at patreon.com/Justin McRoberts. I'd love to have you on the team. Until next time.